Welcome to the Conscious Dominance Podcast, where Andrew and Eric, two dominant men in dom sub relationships, discuss how we approach our dominant roles from a conscious and loving place, and what we learn about ourselves through the deep intimacy that these power exchange dynamics make possible. Sit back and enjoy the show.
All right. Good afternoon, Andrew. It's good to see you.
Good afternoon. Glad to see you. Good to be here.
Good to be here too. I definitely look forward to this. This is like a cross between therapy and hanging out at a bar and just going for a good hike. Like it's a good time and I appreciate it. So
yeah, I do as well. And I think the thing for me is we get to have these conversations where we're unpacking stuff about our lives. And that's how this whole thing started, right? It was you and I having these conversations and, hey, you know what? Other guys might want to hear these. So it still is that to some extent, just now we have lots of people who listen to them. So that's fun too.
Yeah, it's good. And I love this topic. This was one that, boy, is this something I deal with? And I was going to run with this one for a little bit and then see where you can jump in here. And The topic is anger. And first and foremost, I was thinking about it before we got into talking about this. I don't want to shame anger. I don't want to condemn anger. This is not where I'm going with this. I want to, first of all, honor anger. Anger is there because at some point I have been violated. At some point, I did not have a voice. At some point, I was not protecting myself when I should have. At some point, I did not speak up. Anger is not a random display of emotion that has no rhyme or reason. It is there because it is protecting. I'm protecting myself when I'm angry.
It can feel very random when we don't understand it, and when we haven't connected to it, it can feel like it's just in control of us, but it most certainly is not.
It's often something that, especially when there's a disproportionate response, it's telling you that whatever you're angry about, there's something behind that and behind that and behind that. And it's an opportunity. I have found it to be an opportunity for me to be curious with myself. And I find anger as a great teacher that says, hey, Eric, there's something going on here that you're feeling, that you're not addressing, that you need to deal with. And when I am able to do that and be curious with myself and be kind to myself and take the time to listen to myself, there's always something back there. And then I can come back to the moment and act from a place that honors what I'm angry about and not be in that state. Because it's rare my anger serves the moment. It is mistimed. It is misappropriated. It has been something that I've had to deal with since I was a little boy. I would rage in hitting tennis rackets. I got kicked off the Little League team. I've been fired from three jobs because of my anger. I've had the cops call on me twice because of my anger issues. I've hit walls. I have expressed anger in ruined relationships and acted in a manner that has nearly gotten me killed, arrested, and done massive damage to my life. And still to this day, I deal with anger. It doesn't mean it goes away. It doesn't mean that I am free from it and I don't feel it anymore. I am learning to navigate it, to manage it, and to honor it. A lot of it stems from being abused, from being bullied, from being in a very controlling household, religion, where I was not allowed to express that type of anger. And I was modeled anger as an appropriate response for mild discomfort. And so it became habituated in my system to be angry. And I have associated anger as something that I take pride in at times. And I have thought of it in the past as a masculine trait. And I think one thing that I want to start off with you and throw at you is something radical to say. What if anger was not a masculine trait, but was actually a misaligned feminine trait? And that when I am expressing anger in a disproportionate response at the wrong time and expressing myself and acting from my nervous system, I'm actually acting in a manner that's not a stoic masculine or even a masculine trait. It's typified often in that way, but it is more often my inner feminine. I'm not saying that women are angry. I'm just saying that the feminine qualities, that is my inner feminine, that is actually being expressed.
I think you're onto something there, and I want to share how I have related this and taught this in the past, which is that any time that we have a triggered reaction to something, that emotion always comes because we're feeling out of control. A reactive emotion always comes because we feel out of control. And so when anger is the triggered reaction, that is just showing us that we are out of control. So a feminine expression. Now we have to differentiate here for newer listeners and watchers. Masculine doesn't equal man and feminine doesn't equal woman. Masculine is the giving characteristic and quality of a person. Feminine is the receptive characteristic and quality of a person. And men have both masculine and feminine energy. Women have both feminine and masculine energy. Our challenge is to align the energy with the expression, meaning to allow the energy to move through us and be expressed in a way that is in alignment with our essence. Most men are masculine. A masculine expression means that we are receptive emotionally. If we are being expressive emotionally, we are upside down. We're a battery that got turned backwards on the remote control and it's not working right. It is an expression of the wounded feminine in us because our hearts should be receptive to emotion. And when we are lashing out with emotion, whether it's anger or anything else, when we are triggered and vomiting our feelings on the people around us, our like excessive exuberance. If you've ever met a guy who's way too fucking friendly, way too nice, aggressively nice, this is the same thing as anger. It is an expression of what should be the strength of our inner feminine as men being turned around backwards.
Truth, 100%. I mean, you nailed it, said, and it's not something that I was aware of in that context until being with Rachel and her experience and articulation and seeing that. And your example and you speaking about it is not something that when I have dealt with my anger in the past, it has felt much more like something that I am to either repress or to channel or to work out. Like I found that working out or any manner, but the problem with that is that it doesn't necessarily address the issue. When I just have in the past taken my anger and channeled it into a workout or my work or my focus, I'm not sitting there and listening to the part of me that was pissed off. And it's still there. When I get the trigger again, I'm going to control that situation to minimize that trigger. And like you've said, it's about being untriggerable. And this is where a woman in your life that is powerful, that has a voice, is the best vehicle of trigger. Like she's literally a trigger vehicle, a car carrying triggers. That's what she's there to do.
We did an episode recently on creating safety. That's a part of how she creates safety is she looks for the softness and pokes it because she's trying to make strength. She's trying to look for, are you strong? Poke.
Correct. And I definitely have areas when I get upset, I am most upset at myself for getting upset. And then there's just this cycle. It's a vicious cycle where I get upset and then I'm like, fuck, I got upset. Why did I get upset? Another thing that I wanted to speak about too that's been really helpful is something that, I don't know if you're familiar with Abraham Hicks. It's also something that Rachel teaches through her work with the Rosha. But this notion that there is a scale, almost like a color scale of emotions, where when we are in the green, we're feeling, or blue, we're connected, we're feeling happy, we're feeling good, we're feeling sourced. And then as we move down into the orange, yellow, and then we are in spaces where things that trigger us, we're going to feel a lot more sensitive. And so that if you can see where these emotions fit on this scale and really have an emotional literacy, emotional literacy is like energetic literacy. And it's something that I have not been versed on. I have not been fully aware or realized to the degree I thought I was good at it. And then being with Rachel, I realized she's terrible at it. A lot of ego, a lot of associating a lot of what I would associate as defensiveness and coldness and anger. And I've associated those as strength or masculine qualities, when instead they are literally like barriers and walls that have kept me in the orange or kept me in these places where I'm feeling this frequency. And I'm not allowing myself to move up into a place that's kinder and gentler and with more of an open heart. And instead, I kind of gravitate in this other place. And when I'm there, I'm coming off like I'm tough, but instead, I'm really just defending myself. And I'm really hurt inside, and I'm not admitting that I'm hurt. And I'm not admitting that there's some really big wound, some, like we've talked about, some vulnerability or some trauma that's hitting a nerve there. And then if I open up about it, then it feels like it's just a wash. But that is much better to feel that and feel the pain of that than to just like resonate in this sort of like frequency where you're just pissed and angry and you're not making any progress and you're pushing away. And being able to know where I am on the scale, and if I'm off, don't bring something up that's going to be triggering. Today I did that. I brought something up when I knew that it wasn't a good idea, but yet I felt this this anger boiling up in me that I needed to prove. And it's always when I feel urgent, when I feel I need to bring it up right away because I got to fix this situation. And this is the problem. Like, this is that reactive mode. And it reminds me of that. There's a Viktor Frankl quote about there's a stimulus and a response and the need to extend it. It's in that gap where we find freedom. It's in that gap where we find our space of, that's our true inner dominance, is when we can feel that stimulus and then choose our response. And that is something that especially my woman has a way of circumnavigating and getting that gap to close the gap where I feel like I have to respond. And it's more of like prolonging the gap so I can choose my response. And sometimes I might need to choose and wait a day or 2 days or 3 days or even longer before I respond to a situation. And it's knowing that's like, hey, I would rather not fix this situation right now, but I would rather wait till I can bring a clear head and a cooler head to the situation than getting all emotional about it and getting angry about it, and getting pissed. And that has been one of the biggest learning curves for me. She's never upset. She's not upset at me for having things to work on. She's upset at me because I bring it up when I'm pissed off, and then I bring my shit in there and I bring my anger in there. Mm-hmm. And she's just, I'm not going to be led by a man like that.
Well, and that's the thing that you point out so well without maybe even realizing that you did it, is that is the way that we get that battery back in the remote control the right way. Is like step 0 is you don't even know that you're reacting. You're so in it. You're seeing red so much that you don't even recognize or understand that the anger is there. Step 1 is seeing that the anger is there and that it is a reaction, and that it's a reaction to something inside of you. It's not about what's out there. It's not about the circumstances. It's about a feeling that is, or something that's happening in here. But then the next step is slowing down that reaction so that you can look at that as it's happening. But then really the final step of this is saying, okay, this, like you are in the process of right now, which is this was a time that I felt powerless when I was a boy. I didn't have a voice. I didn't have any way to make myself safe, and that made me very angry. And then I held on to that anger, and I carried it with me into the present moment. And when we can bring enough care and love to that younger inner child, that little boy who was out of control and who didn't have a voice, and just love him rather than trying to resist the anger that we're feeling now, to just allow that to be there. It's obviously going to be there if we went through shitty things when we were kids. So we just allow that. We don't resist it. We don't try to get rid of it or push it down, but we do try to slow it down enough that we don't hurt people with it.
Right.
But then
or hurt ourselves.
Yeah. Then we can go and give some love and affection and attention to this younger part of ourselves that didn't have it back then. This is reparenting, right? This is how reparenting meets dominance. Because when I say untriggerable, what I mean is that we can heal these painful things that happened in the past so that we don't feel the reaction to them. Like, we can get beyond the needing to feel the stimulus and bring clarity to it later. We can get to a place where we just literally feel okay.
Yeah, because the reactivity is what's not attractive. And the reactivity is what is when you're not being in your dominance and in your leadership. Mm-hmm. You're actually being submissive to your feelings and to your emotions. And then wanting to prove that you're a dominance, I have, by telling that person, but from the wrong energy. And this is where we have like tyranny. This is the story of the patriarchy. It's like men who are pissed off and want to feel better about themselves and control other people around them so that they feel better. And that is not what we're speaking about here.
No, because all of that anger is really just old anger that was stuffed and not felt or not accepted when there was probably a really damn good reason to be angry. But that emotion gets stuck in us when we're out of control and we don't have a way to feel it. We carry it with us. And then something, like you talked about the woman circumnavigating the system and poking us in those places that hurt. Like, that's just poking an old wound and ripping it open again. Yeah, it doesn't have to be like that. We can transcend these things. And that's the thing that I want men to hear, is that your anger is okay. Like you said, there's no reason to shame this. It's just a real emotion. It's just an old emotion that up until now you haven't felt capable of setting down and leaving in the past, because you haven't acknowledged the pain that you felt back then yet. Mm-hmm. And when we stuff something, it's still in there, and then it's there to be poked, it's there to be reacted to, it's there to come up and be triggered. So we have to allow what has been stuffed to be felt so it can be let go of.
You got to feel the heal. You got to feel it to heal it. And that feeling of it, that's another opportunity for you to create a container for yourself, for myself, to actually feel the thing and feel the incident and really go there so that you can transmute it, you can alchemize it. And that becomes the superpower. And when we can do that in real time around our woman, that's the superpower. That's when you're really, like you say, untriggerable. I'm not there yet. I still get triggered. I still have to take timeouts, put myself in timeout. I still have to walk away. I still have to go on my walks. I still have to do my breathing exercises. I still have to, there's any number of techniques. The main one, though, is just the pause. Just the whole idea is that whatever's going on, pause it, push pause. You feel that boiling up, that rage, walk away, pause, take a pause, extend the time. Do you have to respond in that moment? Do I have to proceed with whatever activity I'm doing, let the person know, or whatever the situation? Can I regroup, bring myself back to it, and then address it? Because when I go after it with that anger and it's just in that fried emotion, does not go well. And I feel, because of my past and because of my experiences, just me not causing damage, I feel like, is a win. But again, I'm in the orange. I'm like, the win is me not punching walls or me not doing damage to something. So it is a matter of moving my frequency up a scale to feel better, so that I'm not in a frequency where I'm just like closely kind of pissed off.
So let's talk about how we change that consciousness level, right? Because you were saying you come up out of red into orange, but like, how do we get to live in the okayness?
I just think of the colors as going from, like, when you're heated, it's warm colors, so like red and orange, and then when you get cooler and you're more in control, it's like blue and green. So, but like, how do we do that? A lot of what my life has been just putting a stopgap, not worried about getting up higher. It's just, oh, I just got to get myself from the red, from the bottom, just to a little bit up to have some control, and that was the win. But as you say, it's like, how do we keep going all the way up? Like, how are we going up with that? That's truly, to me, what a practice is. That's what meditation is. That's what yoga is. That's what a good martial arts is. That's what working on our nervous system. A lot of this is nervous system work. This is where, how are we dealing with testing our nerves and our nervous system, our fear, and pushing that and holding ourselves, and how do we hold ourselves in stressful situations? I think a lot of it is a practice, and not beating ourselves up when we can't do it, and not giving up.
I think of two words, and those would be, one, responsibility. Like taking responsibility for the fact that that anger is there. And two, acceptance. Along with acceptance is releasing resistance to the anger. Because we have to be willing to be able to be with it. And it's the very nature of what the ego does, which is tells you, if you accept this, it's going to blow up and it's going to hurt people. It's going to hurt me. I can't accept it. I have to stop it. I have to push it down. I have to resist it. But that the energy of resisting the reality of the fact that that anger is there is the very thing that keeps it there. It's what keeps you stuck in the activated, triggerable state. So it's by allowing it, and maybe like in some controlled demolitions, some controlled detonations, to just let yourself be angry. Right? So I'm thinking less like work out and get the anger out, less do yoga and learn how to calm yourself. Important things. But I'm talking about like letting yourself rage. If it feels like you're still full of rage because of something that happened when you didn't have control, letting it happen. Controlled demolition. Go to a rage room with a fucking sledgehammer and beat the shit out of a TV, or go to one of those places where you can rent a backhoe and crush a car. Just do something to let it out, and just, like you said, feel to heal. I've never heard that before somehow, but it's very pithy and also accurate. But I think in order to feel cool on the inside, we have to allow ourselves to move the energy that's stuck in us, that's always there boiling.
For sure. That is a good point. I have trouble with that, because when I've allowed myself, the other day I watched Incredible Hulk, and the original one, and I relate to that character, and he's just, okay, pretty soon the boiling, and then he's like, I'm out of control. And so it's just about keeping it from getting to this point. But then as the saga continues, he gets to a point later in the later series where he's able to be in that state and integrate it and have control over it and not be scared of that side of himself. I feel like I'm still working on this idea. I still struggle with thinking there are good qualities that I have and bad qualities. There's a good way to behave and a bad way to behave. And I still, as much as I know that's not helpful, I still fall prey to that. And especially when I'm stressed, especially when I'm in an off state, I go to this place where I'm like, that's bad, this is good. And that I've put my anger into the bad category. And I know that what you're saying of accepting and allowing that and just being okay with that, it scares people. It causes havoc. I haven't honored it. And I know that until I honor it fully, I started this whole episode by saying I want to sit here and honor it. That's aspirational. I'm not I'm not there yet. It is still something that I wish away often because I feel like it's done more damage and more harm than good. And I still am navigating how to but I find that when I just beat myself up and say that I shouldn't have that, I also am diminishing my power and my strength and my chi and my life force. And so it truly is this way of honoring it, because it is the times when I can honor it and honor that and then integrate that I'm able to be there. And I think so much of our time is how do I honor our anger and not let it go? Like I don't have, and I have not had many examples of men who are honoring their anger fully in their chi force, like fucking power, and that you can tell that they'll fucking kill you if they need to, and in full control of their anger and their rage. Often people that have that sort of thing, you slay the slightest thing and you're fucking there's not necessarily a controlled sword there. Like it's a sensitive sword. And so a lot of men, I feel like, in my experience and even my own bout with depression, my depression often, and even suicidal tendencies, is being like, hey, my anger is dangerous, so I have to just shut it down, and then I'll be okay out in the world. But that just makes me fucking depressed. And I think many men actually commit suicide to protect people around them because they feel like they are going to harm people. And they literally are doing it to protect the people around them because they feel like they are too much or too dangerous. And I think a lot, when you look at statistics and how many men commit suicide versus women, I swear to God, because I know, because I feel that. I feel that in me. I felt that. That's why I have wanted to commit suicide, is because I have felt my anger is too much and I've done more harm than good with it. And I feel like I should just fucking end because it's going to just cause havoc. You had something you want to say. Go ahead.
Well, you mentioned depression and being depressed. And you think about that word, to depress.
Yeah.
You're depressed because there are feelings that you haven't allowed yourself to feel. And so you're depressing them. So do we get depression or do we depress ourselves?
Yep.
I don't know, but I know that by allowing ourselves to feel whatever the feeling is, things get better. And my question that I want to explore a little bit here with you is the fear of anger. There's a programming that happens with that, where you feel the anger, it comes out, someone gets hurt, you feel the pain because you don't just lash out at somebody, you also feel how it feels to have affected them in that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then it comes out and you're afraid of it, and then you're trying to depress it and you're trying to push it down, and it's not getting any better, but what it's getting is more layers of anger piled on top of it, because now you're angry about not being able to be angry, and you're angry at yourself for getting angry.
That's me.
And it's just this self-reinforcing loop.
Yep.
But so
Yeah,
how do you see it being possible to maybe transcend that fear?
You got to feel it, and you got to accept yourself in that. It truly is it. There's no other way. Like until you do that, it's always there. It's simmering. The alchemy can only happen, and it's as simple as it really is a love. It goes back to self-love. At the root of all of this is that there's a part of myself that I don't feel like is acceptable, or that if I was to let out, I would feel too vulnerable, too weak. And I hate that side of myself. And so I'm lacking that part of myself that's able to love all of me. And so there's a part of me that I don't love. And that protection is actually from a place of love. It's like the best I can do at the moment. And I think a lot of times anger, we have to realize that's the best I can do at the moment. And that's actually better than being walked all over and feeling like a fucking pansy and sitting on your ass and doing nothing. Like anger is a step up over like despondent collapse. Like anger can, but then what do you do with that anger and navigating that emotion? And how do I transcend that and transform that and feel that and heal that and navigating that whole thing? To me, that is literally like my life's effectiveness with my woman, with my dominion, with my sexuality, with my work. Like all of it comes back to that puzzle.
What would a healthy expression of anger look like? That's the other side of this. What's anytime that we have these parts of ourselves that we've shoved down and we've suppressed and we've depressed and we haven't allowed ourselves to be, which like mine was my sexuality. So I have that part of myself that I hated for most of my life and assumed that it caused problems and that it hurt people. And I was afraid of it. Like it wasn't anger for me, but I have a I'm listening to you talk about anger and I'm like, it wasn't anger, but you're describing my own biggest shadow piece. So what does a healthy expression of anger look like? Like one way that anger can be a very healthy expression is righteous anger by someone who's in solid self-control, but saying, you know what? I got everything together just fine. But if you hurt someone that I care about, God help you.
Mm-hmm.
Are we clear?
Yeah.
Like that kind of calm inner state allows that anger to be a tool to be deployed rather than a reactive trigger inside of us.
This is why I think the only movies I cry fully, like I am like, oh my God. Lately, Rachel's getting me feeling a little more into the romantic comedy, like the romantic things, because I'm actually in love. But most of my life, the only time I'm crying is like Braveheart. It's like pure bravery, pure valor, pure like 300, like Vikings, like shit where the guy is showing the fuck up to stand up for his people, for his woman, for his kids, for his country. That kind of it's core. It's core. And that expression of that is that righteous anger. And it is literally to take that away from us is to literally take away our lifeblood. It's to take away the very thing that gets us feeling vigor and alive and fucking that's it.
That's your
so the
edge.
Anger, you've just got to figure out how, because the anger is also chi, like it's force, it's blood. And it's just how do we drive the car with that blood in us? And how do we not let it be reactive? How do we control it? How is it a response? How are we able to hold that and honor that and move it? And it's being an artist and you've got a medium. It's like paintbrush. It's your paint.
Is there some fear for you around losing your edge if you were to let some of the anger go? Like losing a part?
Stop my anger? Oh, when I feel like the choice that I'm still dealing with right now is if I let the anger go, I just feel despondent. I'm just like, what's the point? I don't know. Like it is when I'm alive, I feel like there's this and yeah, I don't know. It's been a journey. This is therapy. This is what I do in therapy is figure this all out, talk about it. This is the trauma work. This is EMDR. This is you're speaking. How do we navigate all this kind of force? This is what I'm dealing with right now with Rachel, is very much how to set that aside and still retain my vigor and my chi and my life force, and kind of come back to that and integrate that and dive that and come back, because it's just untenable. And so I recognize this, but at the same time, I am still at a place where I want to honor the life force of that anger, and that it is often a stepping stone towards something. And there are times when I do feel like it's necessary and it's the appropriate response. But as you say, what am I afraid of losing it? Yeah, I'm afraid of losing any sort of motivation to proceed.
The anger has been the driving force in your life. And it feels like...
Just call it anger, or is it calling it like, I give a fuck about my kids and my self-respect?
You see how close you have those attached?
Yeah, I do. Like taking care of them, showing up for them, doing the things that are necessary and needed to stand up for, my story of having to be there for them when no one else was there for them, and getting my life together to do that and to be there in that way for them. Yes, it is closely attached, and I am, but this is the work. I was the one who brought it up, so it's alive in me. And I think we've talked about that I'm a lot more reactive, and I think you have a control of your anger, and you also tend to kind of like whether it's controlling it or it's repressing it. I think you're less repression now, but I think in the past you've told me that you.
Yeah, my response hasn't been to lash out. It's rather than try to protect myself by pushing everything the fuck away and destroying things in my path. Mm-hmm. I just turn it all inward. I turn the hatred inward, and I just lash out inward and crush myself.
I do both.
And it's far more insidious in some ways because it's not visible. And it doesn't hurt other people maybe as directly as a lashing out and as lashing out with anger does. But when I turn my anger inward and I crush myself, what I end up doing then is walking around resentful and needy and unable to speak up for what's important to me. And so that's where I have had to work to overcome, essentially neutering myself, cutting off my own balls.
That's exactly been my response often to anger. I go both ways. I get expressed, and then I'm like, okay, I can't do that. So then I'll cut off myself and neuter myself. And that fluctuation between those two is definitely something that I've had to deal with.
And this is all what comes back to this idea of resistance, and really all shadow work mimics this, whether it's sexuality or anger or anything else. All of our shadow work, especially as men, really comes back to breaking out of this express or stuff, like react or stuff binary.
Yeah.
And bringing love and acceptance to the part of us that is doing the reacting or the stuffing, so that we can just set down all of that and just walk away.
Yep. And the stuffing, to me, leads to really dark places. And so I think the reacting, and then that brings it up. So I'm like, oh gosh, I have something to deal with. And it puts urgency in that. And I've found in the past when I've stuffed, and I'll have long extended periods of time where I'm like calling myself stoic, but I'm really just stuffing myself and simmering. And it's not actually, the way to know that is when you open up your heart. When we talked about that sensitivity-ish episode, I really feel like the sensitivity episode and this episode really are closely linked, because to me, a lot of what's kept me from being sensitive to a lot of the potential of things is because I can't just open up my sensitivity and feel the good stuff. I'm also feeling all this pain. And so I want to really honor all the men out there that go through life from a place of a closed heart. A lot of times they're protecting themselves a lot of wounds. And when they start to open up their heart, they're starting to feel a lot of stuff. that's going to knock them sideways and knock them down. And if they don't know that that's what's happening, they're just going to shut their heart back down and proceed as, what's the point opening in my heart? I'm just going to feel all this shit. You got to have a container, some way to be held in that and be able to move through that. And it is something that can transform. And this is where art comes from. This is tragedy. This is really what it is to alchemize. And this is where we gain wisdom. And this is where we gain a sense of being an elder, is when we're able to feel those things and then transform them and come out the other side and be in a new paradigm. But it only comes through feeling the pain. You can't get to wisdom without getting through pain.
Yeah, and a part of maturity then is being able to hold the space for other men who are going through their own process, because this is where men have got to have other men. We've got to have friends, brothers that we can go to sort this stuff out. And it's what's really sadly lacking, but not just brotherhood. Like, you can have brotherhood with a bunch of guys who are all dicks and who haven't done their work, but they're like, yeah, we're brothers. But I'm talking about a place where you can really be open with your heart, open with your emotions, open with your feelings, open with your anger, open with your depression, with all of it. And just to have acceptance mirrored back to you, especially by someone else who's done that work for themselves.
Accountable too. There's boundaries to it too. Like you can feel called out on that.
Yeah. Like,
yeah,
we've got to be comfortable and get comfortable with being called out if we want to grow. Like, that can't be one of the things we push away, is when somebody's like, hey buddy, you can be better than that.
Especially by our woman. And I think one of the things that I know from my own experience, that when a woman is calling me out, is particularly triggering. It's much easier for me to be called out by a man. I'm sexist in that way, I guess.
No, hang on. I want to stop you there, because I don't think that's sexist. I think that is a perfect example of how the things that trigger us show us where the pain is. I was hurt by women. I was molested by a woman. I had a mother who was very emotionally volatile. I had pain from women in my childhood. And so women have been one of the biggest triggers for me in a lot of different ways. Same as you, far more than other men.
Yep.
So the things that trigger us are actually, as much as the triggers are not fun, they give us an ability to see where the pain is, if we're willing then to go be with that pain.
For sure. For sure. That is an accurate statement. And that has definitely been my experience. And I feel like when we do this work, we're not just doing it for ourselves, but we're doing it for our kids. We're doing it for other men. Because until I actually have done this work and have shown up to this, I am not able to fully be there for other people, because I don't know exactly what that is. I don't know how to hold that. It's confusing. And a lot of this, until you've gone through it, you don't know really how to be there. You can, to a degree, but there's something about being a man helping other men that only I feel like a man can understand what it is to feel that. And I have found that women are less sympathetic or compassionate to anger issues.
Exactly. This is a part of their protection, and why women are so attracted to men who are in control of their anger. Now, not necessarily men, and not men who just don't have any anger, because those are men who are more dangerous probably than angry men. The excessively nice guy. The thing that's the most attractive to women is men who can have an intensity to them, but they have it under voluntary self-control. This is something Jordan Peterson talks a lot about. Having a sword, but having it sheathed.
Exactly.
But still having the sword.
Yep. I like his whole thing in the Bible about blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, and how that word of that was really, blessed are those that have a sword and keep it sheathed, shall inherit the earth. Like, have the strength to keep it in check. And that goes back to that quote, that's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
100%.
It's you've got to be able to keep that in check. And our time is a really hard time to navigate masculine energy and force. We get a lot of messages out there that it is dangerous, it is unsafe, it is, and I get it. I see that. But the response to it is not to just stuff it or to throw it away or to deny it or to criminalize it. When we're not addressing anger, we're not addressing men. And the expression of anger and navigating that and providing support to that is literally providing support to men. People say it's not allowed also, but I feel like more men deal with the negative consequences of their anger and keeping it stuffed and doing things to themselves that are far more dangerous than...
Well, men's anger tends to be far more physically mm-hmm. violent. Women's anger tends to be more emotionally violent, which mm-hmm. is also incredibly hurtful, but not illegal.
Right.
And all of this is also why I want to touch on both women's anger and why men need other men here, because in our ability to gain that voluntary self-control, to keep that sword sheathed, not only do we get to become a stronger version of ourselves, and we need other men to do that, because if we are trying to process and work through this in the presence of our woman, now she's feeling our unresolved anger, and that is going to feel unsafe to her. So working through it with other men and in therapy with professionals and whatever else you need to do it's important, because then you can come back into that relationship and be strong enough then to be present with her anger, because guess what? She's been through shit too, and she's been hurt too, and she's angry too. And we have no space to hold her anger when we're like, but what about mine?
And that's when we started, we were talking about the anger being this expressive feminine energy. I know that because when I'm pissed, I want to make sure she knows why I'm pissed. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure that my voice, that my pain is heard, and I'm going to check myself and breathe through it and honor. And I'm like, okay, and here's why I'm angry. I want to feel this, and I want you to validate to me that like you heard me in my anger, and you honored my anger, and that we're there. And she does all those things, and you walk away and you're like, oh, wait a second. Maybe she was angry too. Maybe she had some shit that she needed to, I didn't even think about that. Because I'm so caught up in my stuff, mm-hmm. I can't actually be there and show up for her. And I'm guilty of that. I have done that in the past. That has been entire relationships in my past.
Well, but that's a perfect example of what the ego is. The ego just wants to be right, and it wants to prove that it's right. It wants to make anyone else wrong that it needs to make wrong in order to be right. And it wants to make itself right to itself. And it will stop at nothing to verify and validate its own existence and its narrative.
Right.
Including fucking up your whole entire life.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that I've found too is, this goes back to one of our first pillars of accountability of conscious Dom. And taking accountability is also realizing, and sensitivity, when you're angry and then you contort yourself and you're calm and you say this and you lead and you dominate, all from a frequency though where you're fucking pissed. That actually is not that's not dominance. You're actually fragile in that state. There's a fragility in that state. And it's not being sensitive. That's not actually taking accountability for how you're actually feeling, because in that state, you're needing the world to contort to you, and you're not honoring actually what's going on.
And if you are using your dominance to control your submissive to keep her from hurting you, from triggering you, from upsetting you. You're just squashing her humanity down to help you avoid your pain.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you need to call a timeout. There are times for me where I'm just like, I can't be in this state right now because I'm too pissed. I can't come back to this because I'm not in a place to be able to do that. And that's better to do that than proceed from that angry kind of place. Because like you said, you're controlling and you're stuffing and it's dehumanizing. And that's actually abusing power. That's the abuse of power. That's bullying behavior.
So the place I'd like to end this is to mention, which I don't believe we've actually mentioned on this podcast before, but both Eric and I work with men who are working to claim their own inner dominance. And if you're looking for a coach, you're looking for someone to support you, you're looking for somebody who can be there for you and show up for you, reach out to one of us. And we're both at very different places in this, and we can both meet you in very different ways. We'll even help you figure out who might be a better fit. But this is something that we both do, and I think we're both very damn good at it, at just being able to relate to people and mirror back to them acceptance of them being where they're at. So reach out to us if you can see or desire some support. It's a great place to bring in a support team, and we'd be happy to be that for you.
Yes. And thank you for saying that, Andrew. And I look forward to hearing from anybody out there that needs that kind of support. We're here to, especially for both of us, we are passionate about honoring men and the masculine's place and navigating the fullness of their power and honoring that in a way that can provide themselves with their own equilibrium, that will empower themselves and potentially provide a situation where they have a submissive woman in their life, but not necessarily is that always what's the needed thing. It can also be just finding their own path of inner dominance.
Thank you for showing up here and for sharing your story with us. I appreciate you, and I have a lot of respect and honor you for your vulnerability and how you show up in these podcasts. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for holding this space, initiating this, inviting me on here. And it's been a great part of my week, and it's always a wonderful check-in with you. So thank you.
Pleasure's all mine, sir.
Thank you.